Okay, and you're just gonna pull with your right hand as you stitch with your left hand. I've dropped my needle down and I'm ready to go ahead and stitch. So I'm gonna stitch, I'm gonna back stitch, and again, you want to make sure that everything going under your needle is flat. And again, you want to turn your dress as you go. Okay, so we're going to continue on stitching. And I like to take my time with my sleeves. To the end, make sure you back stitch. Okay, clip your threads. And then once you have your first row of stitches in, you are safe to remove your basting from that first sleeve that we just stitched. Okay, so that should look something like this. Now, before you stitch your second stitching in, go ahead and turn your sleeve over and look at it. Like really look at it thoughtfully and make sure it's flat. Make sure it's nice and neat and not bumpy and lumpy before you do your second row of stitches. Because now's the time, if you want to go back and use your seam ripper and try it again, you can before you do another row of stitches. So that's what I would suggest. That's what I started to do for myself, is just look at it and say, hey, is this the sleeve that I want to show to the world? And if not, try it again. So do that. So now that we have removed our second row, well, now that we have removed our row of basting stitches, we're going to go back in for our second row of stitches, which is going to be 1/4 of an inch from the first row. And what I like to do is just line up the outside of my presser foot with my first row of seams. It might not exactly be 1/4 of an inch, but I don't really like to measure that. So I just do that so that I know exactly where to stitch, back stitch, and then just keep that presser foot lined up with the first row of stitches. and back stitch at the end, and then clip your threads. So this is how that should look, your 2 rows of stitching. So we're gonna, after that, go ahead and go to our other sleeve, and we're gonna do the same thing. So we have put our sleeves in, you guys. Let's go back to the table. Actually, we're gonna go press, so let's go to the ironing board. Okay, so for my sleeves, I like to use a tailor's ham, which is this, because it looks like a ham. It's really good for sleeves just because it helps the shape. Yeah, but I'm just gonna press those 2 rows of stitches that we did, and I'm gonna press my seam allowances towards the sleeve. So seam allowances are going this way, and I'm just gonna press all the way down. All right, so that's nice and pressed out. Let's go back to our table. Okay, so now that we have that pressed, so now is where we're just gonna trim close to the 2nd row of stitching. I do like to use my serger, but I will go ahead and use, and again, put your hand underneath so that you know what you're clipping and you're not clipping into your dress. I'm just slowly turning a little bit at a time, clipping close to my 2nd row of stitches. Okay, so we're in a good place, you guys. Can you believe we're almost done? So the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna pin the back to the front at the sides, and we're gonna pin our sleeve edges together as well. And in one continuous seam, we're gonna stitch the underarm curve all the way from the sleeve down to the bottom of our dress. So this is gonna be good. Okay, so you're gonna have your dress turned to the wrong side because we're gonna stitch right sides facing right. So go ahead and turn your dress, and I'm gonna start pinning at my sleeve. I'm gonna pin my landmarks, so I'm gonna start right here at the very edge because that has to line up so that when we hem our sleeve, everything's lined up. We have 2 notches, well, we have a notch here. We're gonna line that up and we're gonna pin. We of course have our underarm seam, which we want that to be lined up. And let's see, that's going to be pressed upwards. So we're gonna pin those going upwards. Well, depending on how you look at it, out toward into our sleeve. So pin it that way. Here you have okay, and we're just gonna continue to pin all the way down our dress. I'm gonna pin the bottom first to make sure that's even and matched up. And then we're just gonna pin everywhere in between. I like to do a few pins at the top, a few pins at the bottom, kind of going back and forth to make sure everything is even. So I'm gonna go back to the top again. I'm gonna go back to the bottom again. And we're in a good place. We're in a good place. I don't see any gaps or puckers or anything, so this is looking good. Okay, so side A is pinned. Now we're gonna turn our dress and we're gonna pin side B. So once we have everything pinned out all the way down, we're gonna go to our sewing machine. I'm actually gonna start my stitching at the bottom hem, and I'm gonna stitch at 5/8 of an inch. Zigzag stitch if you're using a knit. If you're not, use your regular straight stitch, and we're gonna stitch in one continuous seam all the way up the side of this dress, all the way up to the sleeve. So let's go ahead to the sewing machine. So let's go ahead and get ready to stitch our side seam. My machine's set to a zigzag stitch, and I'm just gonna drop my needle down. We're gonna stitch and back stitch at the beginning. And then I'm just gonna continue on. I'm gonna remove my pins as I go and make sure everything's lined up nicely. I'm gonna slow down a little bit when I get to this seam here, my underarm seam, because it's a little more bulky and I wanna make sure that, you know, I'm just taking my time here. So that is side A of this stitching. They do want us to go along the same stitching again just to reinforce that seam because it is going to get a lot of wear. But before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and do my second side. So we are just stitching along the first stitch line that we've already done. And we're gonna do the same thing again on the other side. So here we are. I am going to press my seams open using my seam roll, but then I'm gonna finish my seams on my serger. And now, yeah, you guys can use whatever you want, pinking shears, serger, but we're gonna first press these seams open. So just use the tip of your iron to press all the way up that seam. Bam. Okay, we're gonna turn this over and we're gonna do the same thing. Pop our seam roll in there. Okay. Now we have that pressed open. Go ahead and finish that seam however you want to, and let's meet back at the table. We have made it to the last part of this sew along. So the only thing left to do now is our sleeve hem and our bottom hem, and we are absolutely done. So once we have that ready, we're gonna turn up. Let's see, we're gonna start with our sleeves. I'm actually gonna go to the sewing machine and I'm gonna do a row of stitching 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge. I'm going to use that as a guide to fold under my raw edge. Okay, so y'all see this little basting stitch that I put in. Now, this should make it easier when we turn under our 1¼ inch on our hem. So again, grab your seam gauge, pin in place around just to make sure it's nice and even. Flip it and make sure the other side is nice and even. And adjust as needed. Okay, once we have that done, again, we're going to baste close to our fold. To grab your needle and thread, and we're gonna baste right at the fold. Okay, so once we have made our way back around, remove your needle. Okay, you can take your pins out. And now we have a guide for our 1/4 of an inch at the top. And we can just fold right at that line. And we know that that is exactly where we want to be. I'm gonna pin through. Just continue working around that line. So let's go ahead and grab our needle and our thread, and we're gonna baste that. Yeah. We're basting just right along, and remember this one you want to try to make it straight as possible because this is going to be our guide on the outside when we go to stitch this hem into place. Okay, make sure again that you gently kind of pull just to make sure you don't have any lumps or bumps or gatherings in your sleeve, both of them. And we're gonna go to our sewing machine and we're gonna stitch again at this is the right side. So we're gonna stitch this top layer of stitches. We're gonna use those as a guide to where we need to stitch. So I'm going to actually finish off my sleeves with a twin needle stitch. I like to use a twin needle for my knits because it just gives it like a really clean finish. I will link my video here on how to do a twin needle stitch. Just in case you're wondering, if you don't want to, you can just use a regular zigzag stitch along your basting to finish off your sleeve hem as well as your bottom hem. Okay, you guys, so we are done. Once you've turned up your hem on your sleeves and your bottom of your dress, and you have stitched them either using a twin needle stitch or zigzag stitch at the bottom, your dress is complete and you are done with this dress. So congratulations, you guys, you made it. If you used a woven fabric, definitely press your dress out. If you used a knit, no need to press it, and you are ready to wear this dress all summer long. Thank you guys for sewing along with me, and I'll see you next time.